storm hadn't stopped for 3 nights. Thunder rolled across the mountains, the growl of something ancient, something waiting. Inside the stone mansion, the vampire lord sat in silence, staring at the boy in his arms. His son, pale, fragile, deaf since birth. No cry, no heartbeat, just the stillness of a child untouched by sound. The doctors had failed. The priests had fled. Even the witches whispered that not even blood could fix what was broken. Then the door creaked open. A waitress from the nearby village stepped in, trembling, her uniform soaked with rain. "I heard your boy doesn't tea here," she said softly. The guards moved instantly, but the vampire raised a hand. Something about her eyes stopped him calm, unafraid. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden box carved with strange symbols that glowed faintly red. When she opened it, the air shifted. Candles flickered backward as if time itself held its breath. "What are you doing?" he demanded. She smiled gently. "Not what you think," she whispered. "What you've forgotten." And in that moment, for the first time, the boy turned his head toward his father's voice. "Stay with me until the end." Because what was inside that box was something no vampire, human, or God was ever meant to touch. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let us get into it. Lord Dimitri had ruled these mountains for 300 years. His castle stood like a black crown against the sky, carved from stone older than memory itself. He commanded armies of shadows, bent kingdoms to his will, made more tremble at the whisper of his name. But none of that power meant anything when he held his son. The boy was 7 now. 7 years of watching other children laugh and play while his own remained trapped in endless silence. 7 years of watching servants move their lips without his son understanding a single word. 7 years of a father's heart breaking in ways that no amount of immortal strength could heal. The child had been born during the worst storm in a century. Lightning split the sky as Dimitri's beloved wife gave her final breath to bring their son into the world. She died whispering a prayer he couldn't hear over the thunder, a prayer he would later realize was meant for this very moment. Every specialist in Europe had examined the boy. Physicians from London, surgeons from Paris, even the mysterious healers from the far eastern lands. They all left with the same conclusion. The damage was too severe, the silence too complete. There was nothing medical science could do. But Dimitri wasn't just any father. He was a creature of the night, and he had resources beyond mortal comprehension. He sought out the darkest magic, the most forbidden rituals. He traded pieces of his own soul for promised cures that never came. He even considered the unthinkable, turning that immortal his son into a vampire, hoping all blood might restore one. Yet mortality had taken nothing worked. The boy remained locked in his silent world. And with each failed attempt, Dimitri felt something inside a little more. The great Hidai vampire lord who had conquered couldn't nations save his own child. The servants whispered when they thought he say couldn't here. The boy was cursed. That his mother's human blood had weakened him. That perhaps it would be kinder to let the child fade away rather than watch him struggle in a world he had never fully joined. But Dimitri knew better. He saw the intelligence burning in his son's eyes. The way the boy watched shadows dance on the wall. How he felt when thunder she vibrations through the floor of the castle. His son wasn't broken. He was simply trapped behind walls that no one had figured out how to break down. The waitress stood in his doorway like something out of a dream. Her name was Elena, and she worked at the small inn where travelers stopped before attempting the treacherous mountain pass. She was maybe 25, with hair that caught the candlelight, and eyes that seemed far did you get cradling a son prouder than her years. "How past my guards?" Dimitri asked, still actively. The moment Elena appeared, not boy had gone rigid in his arms. From fear, but from something else. They said you entirely recognition perhaps, or hope me through. She said, simply been expecting me. But Dimitri hadn't been expecting anyone. He'd given up on visitors months ago. The last so-called expert had left with a bag. Dimitri had sworn never to let another Charles promises and of gold and empty a ton near his son. "I don't you can't know what you think. Do that others at Tri-Haven Tea," he said, his voice carrying centuries of exhaustion. "Doctors, priests, witches, sorcerers, they've all failed. What makes you think a village girl can't? Elena stepped closer, and Dimitri noticed succeed where they couldn't see something strange. The shadows in the room seemed to bend toward her, not away. Candle flames burned brighter in her presence instead of dimming. Even the storm outside had quieted the moment she entered because they were all trying to fix what they thought broken. She said, "But your son isn't broken, Lord Dimitri. He is protected." The words hit him like a physical blow. The voices that protected from what? From hearing have been calling his name since the night he was born. Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The same voices that killed his mother. The boy in Dimitri's arms suddenly reached out toward Elena, his small fingers grasping at the air between them. For 7 years, the child had never anyone, not reached for even his father. But now he strained towards strange as if she held the key to everything he'd been missing. "What are you?" Dimitri demanded, his fangs extending instinctively. Every supernatural sense he possessed was screaming warnings. Yet none of them felt like danger. They felt like possibility. "Someone who remembers what came before," Elena said. She pulled the wooden box from her pocket, and Dimitri could feel power radiating from it like heat from a forge. The symbols carved into its surface weren't just glowing. They were moving, shifting, and changing as if they were alive. "Your wife wasn't just human, was she?" Ilian continued. "She had the gift, the ability to hear beyond, to communicate with things that exist between worlds. That's how she knew to love a vampire. That's how she knew you, monster." Wherein Dimitri's grip tightened on his son. It was true, though he'd never spoken up to anyone. His wife had possessed abilities that defied explanation. She could sense his presence from miles away, knew his thoughts before he spoke them, predicted storms days before they arrived. He assumed it was just intuition, the way some. The gift humans seemed naturally attuned to the supernatural world passed to your son, Elena said. But it came with a price. The same voices that guided his mother to you have been trying to claim him since birth. His deafness isn't a disability. It's a shield. The box in Elena's hands began to vibrate, and the symbols shifted faster, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. But shields can become prisons, and your son is old enough now to choose. Choose what? Dimitri's voice was barely controlled. Everything in him wanted to snatch the boy away from this woman and her impossible claims. But something deeper held him back. The same instinct that had kept him alive for 3 centuries was telling him to listen, whether to stay safe and silent, or to risk everything for the chance to hear his father's voice. Elena lifted the lid of the box, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Velvet was a single inside, bundled in black-white pearl. But this was no ordinary gem. It pulsed with its own light, and within its depths, Dimitri could see swirling galaxies of color that had no names. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, and he could swear he heard something, not with his ears, but with something deeper, a song without words, a call without sound. The boy in his arms began to cry for or fear, but from Lon the first time in his life, not from panging so pure and desperate that it broke over again. The Dimitri's heart all child was reaching for the pearl with both hands, tears streaming down his pale cheeks. What will it do to him? Dimitri asked, though part of him already knew the answer would terrify him. It will give always wanted, Elena said. Him what he has the ability to hear you say you love him, but it will also open him to everything else, the whispers from beyond, the calls from the dark. The voice drove his mother to sacrifice herself to keep them away from him. Thunder, a moment Dimitri saw crashed overhead, and for his wife's face in the lightning's glow, she was shaking her head, tears in her eyes, mouthing words he couldn't understand. But then the boy's crying intensified, and when Dimitri looked down, his son was signing something with his tiny hands. But unmistakable was crude. Please. Dimitri stared at son's trembling hands. The word please formed in crude but desperate gestures. 7 years of silence, and now this. The pearl in Elena's box pulsed brighter, as if responding to the child's plea. The very air seemed to thicken with possibility and dread. You don't understand what you're asking, Dimitri whispered to his son, though he knew the boy couldn't hear him. Some gifts come with prices too terrible to pay. Elena stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the child's face. He already knows the price, Lord Dimitri. Look at him. Really look. For the first time in months, Dimitri truly studied his son's expression. What he saw there wasn't the blank confusion he expected. Instead, there was an intelligence that seemed far beyond the boy's 7 years. An understanding that chilled him to his immortal core. The child had been watching, learning, reading lips, studying faces, interpreting the world through senses his father had never considered. He knew exactly what his deafness cost him, and more importantly, what breaking free from it might demand. The voices that called to him, Elena continued. They're not evil, Lord Dimitri. They're his mother's people, the ones who exist between life and death, between sound and silence. They've been trying to guide home. Dimitri's voice core him home. Act with an emotion he hadn't felt in centuries. Fear. Pure parental fear. This is his home with me. Is it? Elena's question hung in the air like a blade. When was the last time he smiled? When did you last see him play? Yes, not living, Lord Dimitri. Yes, existing, waiting. The pearl's glow intensified, and suddenly, Dimitri could hear something impossible. His wife's voice, soft and distant, calling from somewhere death. She was singing beyond the veil of the lullaby she used to hum while pregnant. The one she claimed would protect their child from the darkness that hunted their bloodline. She, him, Elena said, reading this still protecting shock on Dimitri's face. But protection can become a cage. The pearl will break that cage, but it will also break the barriers between worlds. Your son will hear everything, the living and the dead, the whispers of angels and the screams of demons. The boy's signing became more frantic, desperate. His small hands formed words Dimitri had never taught him. Words that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his genetic memory. Mother, darkness, choose, love. Thunder exploded overhead, and for a moment, the castle's ancient stones trembled. In that instant of chaos, Dimitri heard something that made his blood freeze. Other voices, dark and hungry, pressing against the barriers that kept them at bay. They had been waiting for this moment, the pearl's power within the walls between dimensions. They know, Elena whispered urgently. The shadowed walkers, they feeders. The boy been circling this castle for 7 years, waiting for the boy to break free. They hunger for children touched by both worlds. Then we don't use the pearl, Dimitri snarled, his protective instincts flaring. We keep him safe. But his son had heard something in that thunder. Something that made his pale eyes widen with wonder instead of fear. For the first time in his life, the boy wasn't afraid. He was reaching toward the storm, toward voices only he could sense. With a lung hygiene broke father's heart all over again. Look at him, Elena said softly. He is not afraid because the truth you've been, he knows hiding from. He knows his mother is calling. The pearl began to rise from its velvet bed, floating in the air between Elena's hands. Its light painted the room in colors that had no names, and Dimitri could feel reality bending around its presence. The very molecules of air seemed to sing with possibilities both beautiful and terrifying. If I let you do this, Dimitri said, his voice hollow with dread, and those things take him, I will tear apart every dimension until I find you. Do you understand me? Elena's smile was sad. But I don't do this. You'll lose resolute. If him anyway, he is already starting to fade, Lord Dimitri. The silence is consuming him from the inside. Soon he won't just be empty. The truth of her words hit Dimitri like a physical blow. He had noticed the changes over the past months. His son's eyes growing distant, his movements becoming mechanical. The boy was disappearing into himself, retreating from a world he could never fully join. What do I need to do? Dimitri asked, the words tasting like ash mouth. Hold him, love him, and when the voices come, don't let go. No matter what you hear, no matter what tries to take him from you. The pearl descended slowly, its light growing so bright it should have been blinding. Instead, it seemed to illuminate things that had always been there, but hidden. Dimitri could see the threads of connection between himself and his son. Silver strands that pulsed with every heartbeat, every breath. But there were other threads, too. Darker ones that led away into shadows that moved independently of any light source. As the pearl touched the boy's forehead, everything changed. The child's eyes flew open wide, and for the first time in his life, sound crashed into his consciousness like a tidal wave. But it wasn't just ordinary sound. He could hear his father's heartbeat, impossibly loud and strong. The whisper of wind through stones that had stood for centuries. The scurrying of mice in the walls. The settling of ancient timber. The very breath of the mountain itself. But beyond all of that, he could hear the mother's voice, clear voices, his and loving, calling his name with joy and pride. Other voices, too welcoming and warm, speaking words innate human civilization. They languages that were beautiful. These voices from beyond. They promised understanding, longing, a world where he would never be alone or different again. And beneath those gentle calls, something else stirred. Darker voices, patient, that had been waiting 7 years for exactly this moment. They whispered promises, too, but theirs carried the weight of eternity and the cold touch of the void. The boy began to convulse in his father's arms, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of sensation. His small body wasn't designed to process the sounds of multiple dimensions simultaneously. Blood began to trickle from his ears as his newly awakened hearing struggled to filter the impossible cacophony. "It's too much," Dimitri roared, pulling his son closer. "Stop this." But Elena was no longer in control. The pearl had taken on a life of its own, its light now so intense that the shadows in the room had been banished entirely. The boy's convulsions intensified, and when he opened his mouth, the sound that emerged wasn't quite human. It was his mother's voice, speaking through their son's throat. "My love," the familiar voice said, though the words came from the child's lips. "I have so little time. They're coming for him, and I can't hold them back much longer." Dimitri's world shattered. His wife speaking through their son, warning him of dangers he couldn't see or understand. The boy's body was being used as a conduit between worlds, and the strain was tearing him apart. "Tell me what to do," Dimitri begged, tears streaming down his face. "Tell me how to save him. You have to choose." His wife's voice continued through their son. "Keep him safe and silent, or set him free and risk losing him forever. But know this, my darling, he was never meant for just one world. He belongs to both, and both will claim him eventually." The darker voices grew stronger, and Dimitri could see them now. Shadow forms pressing against the barriers of reality, reaching through the cracks the pearl had created. They had faces of hunger and eyes like dying stars, and they wanted the boy who could hear between worlds. "Choose quickly," Elena urged, her own voice strained with effort. "The pearl's power is creating a bridge, but I can't control." Dimitri looked down what crosses it, at his son, convulsing, still bleeding, but for the first time in 7 years, truly alive. The boy's eyes were open and aware, looking directly at his father with recognition and love and desperate hope. In that moment, Dimitri finally understood what his wife had tried to tell him all those years ago. Their son wasn't broken. He wasn't cursed. He was something new, something that existed between worlds by design, not by accident. The question wasn't whether to heal him. The question was whether Dimitri was brave enough to let his son become who he was truly meant to be. The shadow creatures pressed closer, their whispers growing more seductive, more insistent. They promised the boy power beyond imagination, understanding beyond mortal comprehension. All he had to do was step across the threshold they were creating. But his mother's voice rose above theirs, strong and clear, and filled with protective fury. "Not today," she declared through their son's throat, "and not ever." The pearl's light exploded outward, and in that brilliant flash, Dimitri saw the truth of what was happening. This wasn't about healing deafness. This was about a whack his bloodline for generations. Eating something that had been sleeping that would either something save son or destroy everything they had ever known. The choice was no longer his to make. The boy's scream pierced through dimensions, carrying frequencies that exist in any mortal realm. Windows throughout the castle shattered simultaneously, their fragments hanging suspended in midair as if gravity itself had forgotten its purpose. Dimitri felt his son's small body temperature plummet to something beyond death. Yet the child's newly opened eyes burned with life more intense than any flame.
Elena stâlgered backward.
Her hands pressed her ears as blood began to seep between her fingers. The virgin she gasped is happening too fast. The barriers between worlds are collapsing through his son's throat. His wife's voice returned, but now it carried the weight of panic. Dimitri listened carefully. The pearl wasn't meant to heal him. It was meant to prepare him for what's coming. Something ancient stirs in the depths. Something that has waited centuries for a child who could hear its call. The shadow creatures pressing against reality's edges suddenly recoiled. Their hunger replaced by something Dimitri had never seen in supernatural predators before. Fear. They weren't trying to claim the boy anymore. They were trying to escape from whatever was rising to meet his call. What is it? Dimitri demanded, clutching his son tighter as the child's convulsions began to synchronize with pulses of otherworldly energy. What's coming? His wife's voice grew distant, as if something was pulling her away from their connection. The first voice, the one that spoke creation into existence. Our son isn't just between worlds. He is the key that unlocks the space before worlds existed. The pearl embedded itself deeper into the boy's forehead, no longer sitting on his skin, but becoming part of him. Where it touched, intricate patterns began to spread across his pale flesh, glowing with the same impossible light, the mark. They formings weren't random to map, charting pathways through realities that had never been explored. Elena's eyes widened with recognition and terror. Those symbols, I've seen them before in the oldest texts. Before the separation of light and dark. Before the first word was spoken, there was a silence. And in that silence dwelt something that chose to remain named. The boy's swing stopped abruptly, leaving a quiet so profound it felt like the world holding its breath. When he opened his eyes, they were no longer the pale blue of his father's bloodline. They had become mirrors, reflecting not the room rounds of what them, but glimpse lay beyond the edges of existence. The child, Papa had whispered, and his voice carried harmonics that made the ancient stones of the castle resonate like tuning forks. I can hear everything now. The songs the stars sing to each other, the conversations between raindrops, the arguments that shadows have with light. Dimitri's heart should have soared at, but the words finally hearing his son's voice carried undertones that chilled his mortal soul. This wasn't just his child speaking. Something vast and incomprehensible was learning to use the boy's vocal cords, testing the limitations of human speech. The first voice isn't evil, Elena said, her own voice trembling with exhaustion. It's beyond such concepts. It simply is, and it's been searching for a way back into creation since the beginning of time. Your son's unique nature existing between life and death, sound and silence, makes him crashed overhead but perfect vessel. Thunder's time it formed words and languages that predated human civilization. The storm itself was speaking, and the boy listened with the intense tilted his head to focus of someone hearing their name called across a crowded room. It's teaching him, Dimitri realized with growing horror. The storm, the voices, they're all part of something larger. They're preparing him for something. The markings spreading across his son's skin began to pulse faster. And with each pulse, reality seemed to bend slightly around the child. Objects in the room shifted positions without moving. Shadows fell upward. The flames in the fireplace burned cold, whilst on the man ice for metal above them began to steam with heat. The preparation is almost complete, the boy said, though his voice now carried echoically older. Soon knows of something infinitive. The silence will remember how to speak again. And when it does, all of creation will listen. Elena pulled a second object from her coat. This one wrapped in cloth that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There's one more choice, Lord Dimitri. One final option I prayed we wouldn't need. She unwrapped the object to reveal a blade forged from what looked like crystallized starlight. Its edge was so sharp it seemed to cut through the air itself, leaving tiny rifts in space that quickly sealed themselves. The severing blade, she whispered. It can cut the connection between your son and the first voice, but the price is absolute. He'll lose not just his newfound hearing, but his connection to both worlds. He'll become truly human, truly mortal with no supernatural abilities at all. Dimitri Saint flooding through him at the blade understanding. And if I don't use it, then your son becomes the anchor point that will remake reality according for something to its will. Not destroy it, but reshape it into recognizable. Every something unvoiced that was ever silenced will speak at once. Every word that was never said will be heard. Theophony will drive to see every thinking being Ma the boy, and within hours his arms turned to look directly at it. And for a son's true personality moment, Dimitri saw his shine through the cosmic presence inhabiting him. The child was afraid, but not of the blade. He was afraid of disappointing his father, of not being brave was coming. I don't enough to face whatever it want to hurt anyone. Papa, the boy said in his own voice, tears streaming down his marked cheeks. But I can hear it calling. So lonely, Papa. It's been alone since before time began, and it just wants to sing again. The empathy in his son's voice nearly broke Dimitri's resolve. Even connected to something beyond human comprehension, the boy's essential nature remained unchanged. He was still the compassionate child who cried, who tried to comfort when servants looked the hunting dogs when end them. The thunder fright her eyes never even Elena continue first voice S&T male leaving the blade. It's like a parent who has been separate. It wants from creation for to nurture and guide, but its very presence will overwhelm everything that exists. Love can be just as destructive as hatred when it operates things on the boy on a cosmic scale. The Mika's skin reached to fingertips, and where they touched objects, the item began to resonate with impossible music. A glass of water sang like a crystal bell. The wooden chair harmonized in deep bass notes. Even the dust O's in the air began to chime with tiny, perfect tones. How long do we have? Dimitri asked, though he dreaded the answer. Minutes, Elenina replied. Once the markings complete their pattern, the connection will be permanent. Found its way back into the first voice will have creation through your son, and nothing in any realm will be able to stop what comes next. The boy looked up at his father with eyes that held both cosmic awareness and childlike trust. You have to choose for me, Papa. I'm not old enough to understand what it all means, but I trust you to know what is best. In that moment, Dimitri felt the weight of every decision he ever made pale in comparison to this one. Save his son by severing his connection to the supernatural entirely, condemning him to a purely mortal existence, but the boy to become something beyond imagination, keeping creation intact. Or allow, risking the sanity of every living being, but to reshape reality itself. The thunder giving his son the power outside formed words again. And this time, Dimitri could understand them. They spoke of worlds where pain didn't exist, where every creature could communicate perfectly with every other, where loneliness was impossible because all minds would be connected. It painted a picture of paradise, but paradise upon forced creation, whether it wanted transformation or not. There is something you're not telling me, Dimitri said to Elenina, his supernatural senses detecting deception in her heartbeat. What else does the blade do? Elenina's composure cracked slightly. It doesn't just sever his connection to the first voice. It severs his connection to everything supernatural, including bond to your you. He once remember being of this. He once remember any full human, which means he age and die as humans do. The final piece of the terrible choice fell into place. Save creation by sacrificing not just his son's abilities, but their entire relationship. The boy would live a normal human life, but without any memory of his vampire father or the supernatural world that had shaped his early years. And if I choose the other path, Dimitri asked, he suspected he already would, then you'll have a son with the power to reshape reality. But he won't be your son anymore. He'll be something new, something that remembers loving you, but can't experience love in any way you'd recognize. He'll exist on a level of consciousness so far beyond human or vampire that communication with him will be like trying to have a conversation with galaxy. The markings had nearly completed their circuit around the boy's small body. Time was running out, and with each passing second, the choice became more irreversible. The air in the room had begun to thicken with tension, as if reality itself was holding its breath to see which future would unfold. Papa, the boy said soft, both his own innocently, his voice carrying that spoke tone and harmonic loneliness spanning eons. Whatever you choose, I'll always love you. even if I can't remember how to show it. Dmitri looked at the blade in Elena's hands, then at his son's to memorize every detail. The face, triangles, inherent curve his small from his mother from the determined set of his jaw which came vampire bloodline. The way his like pools of star newly opened eyes reflected light water. The first voice whispered through the boy's lips one final time, and its words carried the weight of genuine gratitude mixed with cosmic sadness. Thank you for giving me a way to remember what it feels like to love something small and perfect and fragile. I had forgotten such beauty could exist. The markings pulsed brighter, reaching toward completion, and Dmitri realized that whatever choice he made in the next few heartbeats would dimension of existence. The stormed echo through every outside intensified. A sky was waiting if the very to learn what reality would become. His son smiled up at him with perfect trust, and Dmitri finally understood what his wife had been trying to prepare him for all those years ago. Some loves are so profound they require sacrifices that redefine the meaning of loss itself. The blade seemed to call to him, promising salvation at an unbearable cost. Teach with INGSP cosmic mark, finalizing energy, bring transformation beyond between those comprehension and caught impossible choices. Sat his son, true father, toasting his somehow a thin option in a that offer situation, only two devastating few paths forward. The next fate, but the fate of every seconds would determine not just their conscious being across all possible realities. And Dmitri had never felt more helpless or more desperate to find a way to save both his son and the world. That son might accidentally destroy. The blade trembled in Elena's grip as the final seconds ticked away. Dmitri could feel the weight of eternity pressing down on this single moment. But something deep in his immortal heart refused to accept either path laid before him. There had to be another way. There always was. Wait, he said, his voice cutting through the cosmic harmonics filling the air. You said the first voice has been alone since before time began. What if we don't sever the connection or two impossible forces collided within? Vampire immortality clashed with cosmic completed. What if we give else? Elena's eyes widened with understanding, his wrist to his then empire's. Flowing into it something son's lips. Dmitri was already moving, pressing what I think you mean, but blood and horror. You can't mean as the markings holdered completion ancient vampire to boy's body of the child, who existed between worlds. The reaction convulsed as was immediate and catastrophe consciousness while his human soul tried desperately to contain both. The markings on his skin began to shift and change, no longer following the pattern of the first voice but creating something entirely new. Papa, what did you do? The boy gasped, his voice layering over itself as if spoken by three different beings simultaneously. Though the chill something cosmic entity, and now else entirely, something that had never existed before. The storm outside suddenly stopped, not gradually, but instantly, as if someone had thrown a switch. The silence that followed was more profound than anything that had come before. Even the first voice seemed shocked into stillness. Elena dropped the blade, her face pale with realization. You've created a paradox, something that shouldn't be able to exist. A being that is simultaneously mortal, immortal, and beyond both concepts entirely. The markings on the boy's skin began to stabilize, but instead of glowing with cosmic light, they pulsed with the settled. The child's flesh became something new. Not quite human, not quite vampire, not quite cosmic entity. I can feel it, the boy whispered. Wonder replacing deep red of vampire blood mixed with something that sold like crushed diamonds. Were they cosmic authority in his voice? The loneliness is going away. Not because it's being filled, but because it's being shared through their blood bond. Dmitri felt it too. The vast, aching emptiness that had driven his voice to seek connection across eons. But now, emptiness was being filtered through vampire vitality and human compassion. Able, transformed into something bare, consuming everything around it. The something that could exist without first voice spoke again. But its words no longer carried the weight of cosmic inevitability. Instead, they held curiosity and gratitude. This is unexpected. I am no longer alone, but I am also. We no longer myself are become something. Elena staggered to a chair, her face etched with exhaustion. The convergence is stabilizing, but not in any way the ancient texts predicted. Your son isn't just a bridge between worlds anymore. He has become a new kind of existence entirely. The boy sat up in his arms, and for the first time since this began, he looked truly like himself again. The cosmic awareness was still there, but tempered by 7 years of human experience, and now enhanced by vampire resilience. His eyes held depths that spoke of understanding beyond his years, but they also held simple love of a child for his father. "I can still hear everything," he said softly, "but it doesn't hurt anymore. The voices to pull me away aren't trying. They're just part of me now, like how heartbeat is part of you." Your Dimitri pulls son closer, feeling the warm hiss returning to the child's skin. The boy was alive in a way he'd never been before. Not just hearing, not just a but true present in a way that bridged every reality he touched. What Dimitri asked Elena happens now. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Now we learn what it means to raise a child who exists in all dimensions simultaneously. She said with a tired smile, "Your son will grow up experiencing every layer of reality, but he'll also have the emotional grounding of a loving father and the immortal strength to handle whatever comes." The boy reached out and touched one of the shattered window fragments still hanging impossibly in midair. At his touch, it began to reform, but not into its original shape. Instead, it became something beautiful and impossible. A crystalline sculpture that captured light from dimensions that had no names. "I think I can fix things," the boy said with the excited voice of any 7-year-old who discovered a new talent. Not change them or control them, just help them be more beautiful. Over the following hours, the true extent of the transformation became clear. The boy could indeed hear everything from his father's thoughts to the conversations of stars, but he processed it all through the filter of human empathy enhanced by vampire wisdom. The cosmic consciousness that had threatened to remake reality became instead a tool for understanding and healing. When servants approached nervously to check on their lord, they found the boy playing with shadow puppets that danced independently of any light source, telling stories that somehow made everyone who heard them feel less alone. The supernatural staff of the castle, creatures who had known only fear or hunger for centuries, found themselves genuinely smiling for the first time in their existence. "He is teaching them," Elena observed, watching as a particularly vicious demon became fascinated by the boy's explanation of how rainbows formed in other dimensions. "Not commanding or controlling, teaching," Dimitri nodded, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his son GD, his essential nature bloom by humming in frequencies had gained cosmic awareness. But he did routinely show a terrified goat how to make flowers that existed between sound and silence. The chill, the compassion that had always marked him as special, had simply been amplified to work across all realities. "Will he be safe?" Dimitri asked, the eternal worry of any parent coloring his voice. "Safer than before?" Elena assured him. The vampire blood gave him immortal resilience. The human soul keeps him grounded in empathy, and the cosmic awareness means nothing in any dimension can truly surprise him. He has become something that can protect itself while choosing to help others. That evening, as the boy settled into sleep, listened to his father's voice reading for the first time with functioning ears. The ancient stories, but he also heard the lullabies his mother sang from beyond the veil, the whispered conversations of night creatures in the forest, and the gentle harmonics of planets spinning in distant solar systems. "Papa," he said sleepily, "I can hear Mom sometimes. She says she is proud of both of us." Dimitri's voice caught in his throat. "What else does she say?" "That love is the only force in any universe that gets stronger when you share it instead of keeping it to yourself, and that you were brave to trust that love could find a way when logic couldn't." As his son drifted off to sleep, Dimitri reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them this moment. He'd begun the day as a desperate father whose child lived in silence. Now he was the guardian of a being who could hear the music that held all realities together, time stories and ask, but who still wanted bed for extra blanket when the mountain nights grew cold. Elena prepared to leave the next morning, her work complete in ways no one had anticipated. "ELL need teachers," she warned as she gathered her few possessions. "Not for human subjects, but for learning how to navigate the responsibilities that come with his abilities. Will you help us find them?" Dimitri asked. She smiled, and for the first time since she arrived, he saw genuine warmth in her expression. "I think you'll find that teachers have a way of appearing when students are ready." Your son has become something the universe has been waiting for. Guidance will come. As Elena walked down the mountain path, the boy waved goodbye from his bedroom window. At his gesture, flowers bloomed along her route despite the approaching winter, and the storm clouds that had threatened for days parted to let sunlight guide her way. Will I see her again? The boy asked his father. When you need to, Dimitri replied, understanding somehow that this was true. That followed brought the days. A parade of visitors, though none came through the front door. A phoenix landed on the windowsill and spent hours teaching the boy about birth through flame. The ancient tree spirit emerged from the forest to share songs that had been growing for millennia. Even the mountain itself seemed to lean in closer, as if eager to participate in conversations that spanned magical time. But through it all, the boy remained fundamentally himself. He delighted in simple pleasures, worried about his father's happiness, and showed a kind of innocent curiosity that marked all children exploring their world. The cosmic awareness enhanced these qualities rather than replacing them. I used to think silence was empty, the boy told his father one evening as they sat by the fireplace. But now I understand it's full of possibilities, like the moment before music begins, when anything could happen. Dimitri watched the flames dance in response to his son's voice, creating patterns that told stories of hope and transformation. The child who had once lived trapped in silence had become a bridge between all forms of communication, helping beings across dimensions understand each other in ways they never had before. Are you happy? Dimitri asked. The question that had haunted him for 7 years finally spoke aloud. His son looked up with eyes that held the wisdom of ages tempered by the joy of childhood. I'm complete, Papa. For the first time, I'm exactly who I was meant to be. Outside, the mountains settled into peaceful quiet, but it was no longer the oppressive silence of isolation. It was the contented quiet of a world where every voice had found its place in the greater song. Guided by a child who had learned that the but in helping them discover their own unique, most powerful magic wasn't in controlling others' music. The storm had finally ended, but what it left behind was something far more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. A family reunited across the boundary of life and death, sound and silence, mortal and mortal love. And at the center of it all, a boy whose laughter could now be heard in every dimension, teaching the universe itself how to sing lullabies. Years passed like whispered secrets through the mountain halls. The boy grew tall and graceful, his abilities expanding with each season that turned. Where once silence had trapped him, now he moved between worlds as easily as breathing. But power, even born from love, carries weight that grows heavier with time. Dimitri watched his son practice in the courtyard one morning. The child, now 13 and beginning to show the angular features that marked the bloodline. With a gesture, the boy caused frost patterns to bloom across the stone, each crystal singing a different note as sunlight touched it. Beautiful but troubling, the servants had begun to whisper again, not from cruelty, but from fear disguised as concern. They spoke of how the boy's laughter could shatter glass. 3 rooms away, how shadows bent toward him, even in broad daylight. How sometimes his eyes reflected scenes from places that didn't exist on any map. Elena returned on a Tuesday when autumn leaves danced in spirals that defied wind patterns. She looked older, her hair streaked with silver that hadn't been there before, but her eyes held the same steadiable. She said without wisdom that had changed everything those years ago. He*s becoming honest preamble finding Dimitri in his study. The convergence point create eyes their calls with ISNT holding. As well as we, a group of forest creatures had a harm and hoped. Through the window they could see the boy teaching ants. Deer hummed the mountain's natural resin alongside wolves while eagles provided percussion with their wing beats. It should have been magical. Instead, it felt like watching reality slowly come unraveled. What do you mean unstable? Dimitri asked, though dread was already pooling in his chest. The 3 natures we merged, vampire, human, cosmic, are beginning to separate as he matures. Like oil and water that were temporarily mixed but are now seeking their natural states. We need to act before they tear him apart from inside. That night, Dimitri found his son sitting by his bedroom window, staring at stars that pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The boy's reflection in the glass showed not one face but 3. shifting and to look at directly and blending in ways that hurt feels strange, Papa, the boy admitted quietly. Sometimes are mine, and which ones I forget, which thoughts belong to the voices. Yesterday I tried to pet one of the cats, but my hand passed right through it because I was thinking like the cosmic part of me that doesn't have a body. The confession hit Dmitri like a physical blow. His son was losing coherence, becoming less solely aspects of his nature, pulled as the different in opposing directions. The vampire part craved blood and darkness. The human part needed connection and warmth, and the cosmic part sought to dissolve into pure energy and understanding. We'll figure it out, Dmitri promised, but his voice lacked conviction. What if you came from a boy-esque human can't? The question nature vulnerable and afraid, what if I disappear completely, what if I become something that can't remember, shifted, taking loving you before Dmitri could answer. On the ancient weight of cosmic awareness, the ability matrices suggest a 73 chance of consciousness fragmentation within the next lunar cycle. Hia said in a voice that carried the mathematical precision of star calculations. Perhaps it would be more efficient to accelerate the process and allow the strongest nature to dominate. Then just as quickly the vampire nature surfaced, eyes flashing red with predatory hunger. Or we could feed properly for once. Stop pretending weakness serves any purpose. Take the three natures warded within him. This was what Elena sung close, feeling the boy's body temperature fluctuate wildly as what we need from the village below. Dmitri pulled his hat, warned about. The miracle that had saved his son was now threatening to destroy him in an entirely different way. Elena spent the next 3 days in the castle's ancient library, poring over texts that dated written language, books bound in materials that might have been leather or might have been something else entirely. There are scrolls covered in symbols that rearranged themselves when viewed directly precedent. She finally announced, emerging from the library with ink-stained fingers and exhaustion etched deep in her features. 300 years ago, in the mountains of Tibet, a similar convergence occurred. A child born at the intersection of multiple supernatural bloodlines. What happened then? Dmitri asked, though he feared the answer. They learned to choose, not permanently, moment by moment. Instead of trying to be all three natures simultaneously, they developed the ability to consciously shift between them as needed, like wearing different clothes for different occasions. The solution sounded almost too simple, but Elena's expression suggested otherwise. The process requires an anchor, someone who can hold the core personality stable while the other natures cycle through. Without that anchor, the consciousness splinters completely. I'll be his anchor, Dmitri said immediately. You can't. The vampire nature would overwhelm you, create a feedback loop that would burn out both your minds. It has to be someone who exists outside all supernatural classifications. Someone purely human, but with the strength to maintain connection across dimensional barriers. They both knew who she meant before she spoke the name. The waitress who first brought me here, Sarah. She's been living in the village, watching over him from a distance all these years. She's the only one who has seen him at his most vulnerable, and to change him, or didn't he try control him? Dimitri's pride recoiled at the idea of depending on a human stranger to save his son. But as he watched the boy struggle with increasingly violent shifts between his natures, pride seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. Sarah arrived the next evening, her hair now gray, but her eyes as calm and knowing as ever. She de-aged in the way humans do, but something about her presence still carried that quality of absolute steadiness that had first drawn Dimitri's attention. He has been visiting me in dreams, she said simply, the cosmic part of him reaching out when the other natures sleep. He is terrified, Lord Dmitri, terrified of, but more terrified of her losing himself. He is fragmenting. The people he loves wilting. The process Elena described sounded deceptively straightforward. Sarah would maintain physical contact with the boy while he practiced consciously shifting between his three natures. Her purely human energy would serve as any one aspect constant, preventing from completely taking over while the risked bluntly. If the others receded, what is to her? Dmitri asked. Focus death.
Elena answers.
She loses for even a moment. The cosmic nature could pull her consciousness into the void between dimensions. Or the vampire nature could drain her life force faster than her human or laneish it. The human nature could create physiology can rep such a Strong empathic bond that she experiences every moment is emotional to this fishing when Sahani of dangers without pain simultaneously listen. Lit do we start that began at midnight when the barriers between realities were thinnest. The boy lay on his bed with Sarah's hand resting lightly on his forehead. Her against his fingers cool stood nearby bird's skin. Elena with monitoring looked like it equipment that had been designed by someone who understood physics. Folk the vampire very differently than human scientists. Nature first, Elena instructed. Let it surface completely, but remember that Sarah is your anchor to return. The change was immediate and terrifying. The boy's canine teeth elongated into proper fangs. His eyes became pools of hungry red light, and his fingernails grew into claws that could have shredded steel. But more disturbing was the shift in his personality. The gentle, curious child disappeared entirely, replaced by something that evaluated every living being as potential prey. Interesting, the vampire nature said, studying Sarah with predatory calculation. This one smells of fear, but she doesn't flee. Unusual. Most humans run when they see what they're truly dealing with. Sarah's voice remained steady despite the terror Dimitri could smell on her skin. You're not dealing with anything except a scared little boy who needs help learning control. The vampire nature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Little boy, I am older than the stones of this castle. I have drunk the blood of kings and queens, felt their power flow through veins that have forgotten what mortality means. And yet you're still sitting in a 13-year-old's bedroom, talking Taurus, who village wait isn't impressed by your threats. Sarah replied calmly, which suggests you're not as powerful as you think. For a moment, rage flared in the boy's transformed features. Claws extended toward Sarah's throat, moving faster than human eyes could follow. But they stopped just short of her skin, trembling with the effort of restraint. How? The vampire nature demanded. Because underneath all that posturing, you love your father too much to hurt someone he asks you to trust. Sarah said gently. Now let the human part come forward. It's time to switch. The transition was like watching someone surface from deep water. Gasping and disoriented, the fangs receded, the claws retracted, and the boy's eyes returned. But his face, to their normal pale blue, was strewn with tears, body shook with remember, and his whole hunger. I wanted to hurt you, he whispered to Sarah, his voice small and ashamed. For just a moment, I wanted to see how your blood would taste. I know, she said, squeezing his hand reassuringly. That's what the vampire nature does. It's not evil. It's just focused on survival in ways that don't always consider other people's well-being. But you didn't hurt me, which means you're stronger than it is practiced for hours. Cycling. They threw each nature while Sarah maintained her steady presence. As the cosmic and anchor point nature was perhaps the most disturbing, not because it was violent, but because it spoke Sarah as if she were already dead, discussing her molecular composition and the probability of her consciousness surviving various dimensional stresses. Your cellular degradation rate suggests approximately 47 years remaining before biological functions cease. The cosmic nature observed with clinical detachment. An interesting limitation. In my realm, consciousness exists independently of physical substrate. Good thing we're not in your realm then, Sarah replied. Here, consciousness and physical existence are connected, which is why this boy needs both to be complete. By dawn, the boy had managed 3 full cycles between natures without losing coherence. Exhausted, but triumphant. He curled up next to Sarah like the child he still was, regardless of which supernatural forces lived inside him. How do you do it? Dimitri asked Sarah as they watched the boy sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. So calm when any how do you stay at yours could kill you without one of those N effort. Sarah smiled, and in that expression Dimitri saw something he hadn't noticed before that had allowed same quality at her. To approach Vampire's castle without fear, to offer hope to creatures far beyond her understanding. Because I see him, she said, simply not entity, not even the vampire, not the cosmic, the human chill, just I see the soul that connects all 3, the part of him that chooses love even when instinct suggests violence. That soul is stronger than any supernatural Dimitri power lore. It just needed someone to believe in it, over boy's control. The following months, the accessing the vampire's strength went to shift between natures. K improved dramatically. He learned protection was needed. The cosmic awareness went complex complex problems required solving and the human empathy when dealing with others who were hurt or afraid. Sarah moved into the castle permanently, officially as the boy's tutor, but actually as something far more important. She became the family's anchor to humanity. The reminder that power without compassion was just another form of emptiness. The boy's 14th birthday arrived with celebration unlike any the castle had ever seen. Supernatural creatures from across the mountain ranges came to pay their respects, but they found themselves drawn into conversations with weather patterns and the small Sarah about agriculture concerns of mortal life. Somehow her presence made even the most fearsome beings remember what it felt like to care about simple things. "You saved him," Dimitri told her as they watched the boy demonstrate his abilities to a fascinated audience. Decided to attend the same of demons and angels who had apparently partied without killing each other. "We all saved him," Sarah corrected. "You gave him love that was strong enough to risk everything." Elena provided the knowledge to make transformation possible. "I just offered stability, but he saved himself by choosing to hold on to his humanity even when cosmic power offered easier paths." At their respective realms, the boy found supernatural guests depart night as the party wound down and Dimitri standing on the castle's highest balcony, looking out over the mountain village windows. "Papa Valley," where lights twinkled in, the boy said, his voice carrying just a hint of the cosmic harmony that marked his transformed nature. "Sarah says you've been worried that I'm growing up too fast, becoming something you can't understand." Dimitri turned to look at his son, seeing in the moonlight a face that held both the innocence of childhood and the wisdom of ages. "Are you?" The boy considered seriously, a chew to examine cycling through his nose. The question from multiple perspectives. "I'm becoming something new," he said finally, "but I'm still your son. That part never changes, no matter which nature is active. The vampire inherited your protective instincts. The human heart learned compassion from watching how you cared for me. And the cosmic awareness understands that love is the force that holds all realities together. And what you grow up, Dimitrikido, you want to be wend." The eternal parent's question taking on new complexity given the circumstances. His son smiled, and in that expression all three natures harmonized perfectly. "A bridge," he said. "Someone who helps others find ways to be complete themselves that make them unique without losing the parts of me below. Like you did for them." Village settled to peaceful sleep, unaware that their safety was watched over by a family that had learned to transform impossible choices into unexpected. The storm that had raged for 3 nights 13 years ago had finally ended. But what it left behind was something far more valuable than mere calm. It had left them proof that love could find ways to preserve what mattered most, even when logic insisted that sacrifice was the only option. And in a world where supernatural forces often demanded absolute submission or complete rejection, that lesson was perhaps the most powerful magic of all. The boy leaned against his father's side, solid and warm and gloriously impossibly alive. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as his abilities continued to develop and mature. But tonight they were simply a father and son who had found their way back to each other across every barrier that distance could devise. And somewhere in the village, a smile on her face below, Sarah fell asleep with future where children like, dreaming of the boy she'd helped save would never have to choose between power and love again. The anchor had become part of the family, and the family had become something that could weather any storm. The weight of what they'd accomplished settled over the castle like morning mist. But peace was a luxury they couldn't afford for long. Word of the boy's transformation had begun to spread beyond them, carried by whispers that traveled faster than any messenger could ride. 3 weeks after Sarah had become part of their family, strangers began appearing at the village inn. Not ordinary travelers, but beings whose very presence made the air shimmer with barely contained power. A woman whose shadow moved independently of her body. A man whose footsteps left frost patterns even in summer heat. Others whose nature defied easy description, but whose intentions were unmistakably clear. They had come to see the child who existed between worlds. "Be careful," Elena warned during meet one of her increasingly frequents. "The supernatural community is divided. Some see him as a bridge to what your son represents to greater understanding. Others view him as a threat that have built their existence could destabilize everything they from his study window as Sarah upon." Dmitri Watch worked with the boy in the garden helping was form while accessing a boulder, attempting him practice maintaining human vampire strength. The child his bull lift Dell without muscle saturally aging unikit balance that required conscious control of at any given moment. Let which nature dominate them come, Dmitri said finally. We're not hiding anymore. But the first delegation that arrived wasn't what any of Silence Appear of them expected. The Covenanted on a Tuesday, when the mountain fog hung so thick, it seemed solid. 7 figures materialized from the mist without warning, their forms wavering between physical existence and something more ethereal. They wore robes that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. And when they spoke, their voices came from everywhere and nowhere at the northern once. Lord Dimitri of Peaks, their leader in tone, gender and age impossible to determine beneath the concealing garments. We represent those who have maintained the barriers between realms since before your coming. Learn to fear sunlight. Your sun's existence violates accords that have kept reality stable for millennia. Sarah stepped protectively in front of the boy, who but from a recognition had gone perfectly still at the stranger's approach. Not that made all 3 of his natures align in weary attention. You're the ones, the boy said softly, his voice carrying harmonics that made the assembled figures step backward. The ones who silenced the first voice originally. You're afraid it's going to remember how to speak through me. Sometimes the most profound transformations come not from choosing between impossible options, but from refusing to accept that only impossible options exist. A father's love found a third path where logic saw only 2 devastating choices. A boy who lived in silence became the bridge between all voices, proving that the greatest magic isn't power over others, but the courage to remain human even when offered godhood. The waitress who appeared in the storm wasn't just a healer. She was hope disguised as an ordinary person, reminding us that miracles often come through the hands of those brave enough to care about strangers. And in the end, the vampire lord learned that true strength isn't about commanding darkness, but about choosing light, even when darkness promises easier answers. What would you have done? Would you have risked everything for the chance to hear your child's voice, knowing it might cost them their humanity? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the impossible choices love make us brave to.